Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast Special Edition Emergency Show. And that is because the New York Football Giants now have a general manager, and his name is Joe Schoen. I think it's a fabulous hire. He was my top choice in terms of candidates they interviewed and candidates that I had just in my mind in general. I'm very proud of the team for going out of the way and out of the Giant way to hire somebody outside of the organization. That is something that John Mara would not have done several years ago. And his partner, Steve Tisch, I think, put it in his ear, like, hey, you got to go outside the organization. And sure enough, he did. And the first guy they interviewed was Joe Schoen. And then the first guy they interviewed in the second round was Joe Schoen. And Joe Schoen lands the job. And I'm very, very happy about this. Obviously, he was the assistant GM under Brendan Bean in Buffalo. Doing a great job helping build that team up to a Super Bowl contender over the past several years. And now he has a chance to rebuild the New York Football Giants. And the other guys they interviewed, Adrian Wilson, who is the Arizona Cardinals Vice President of Pro Personnel. Quentin Harris, Arizona Cardinals Vice President of Player Personnel. Ryan Poles, Kansas City Chiefs Executive Director of Player Personnel. He got a second interview as well. Ryan Cowden, the Tennessee Titans Vice President of Player Personnel. Monty Ossenfort, the Tennessee Titans Director of Player Personnel. Joe Horitz, the Baltimore Ravens Director of Player Personnel. Rand Carton, the San Francisco 49ers Director of Player Personnel. Adam Peters, San Francisco 49ers Assistant General Manager. And then the final three were Shane, Poles, and Peters. And those were, ironically enough, my top three candidates for the job as well. It was just a coincidence that the Giants gave all three of those guys a second interview. And they picked Joe Schoen, and I think he's very deserving of this job. My second choice for this job was Adam Peters, who I think has done a marvelous job with John Lynch building up the 49ers over the past couple of seasons. My third pick was Poles, who I think has done a nice job with the Chiefs, building that team. And then my fourth choice was Joe Horitz of Baltimore. And then my fifth choice was Ryan Cowden of Tennessee, or Monty Ossenfort of Tennessee, one of those two. That's my 5 and 5A, if there were such a thing. I'm supposed to have on Derek in a couple of moments to get his take on this hire, and maybe we'll talk a little bit of Australian Open at the end of the show. I'm sure he's going to like this hire as well, if I had to guess where he was going. When I had Jeff Burns on about 10, 11 days ago, the Giants fired Joe Judge, he said he really liked the idea of Joe Schoen coming in as the next GM. He also really liked Adam Peters as well, and I'm sure he's very thrilled about the Schoen hiring as well. And now what's next for the Giants? Head coaches. They're going to start interviewing head coaches over the weekend. I think the Giants are doing this absolutely right. Meanwhile, the Bears are interviewing coaches and GMs together, left and right. Meanwhile, you do the GM first, then you do the coach. That's how it goes. That's how it should go, and I think the Giants are doing it right. And by the way, Shane interviewed for the Bears GM job, if I'm not mistaken. And that is not a good look for the Chicago Bears that he passed them on for the Giants, who, by the way, both the Giants and the Bears have been equally dysfunctional franchises in their own ways. I think that the Bears just have more talent than the Giants, just in general. And I just think that the Giants, what really helped them was, ironically, the Bears training up for Justin Fields with the thought of 2 first-round picks, and that is really something to be happy about if you're a new general manager, although a lot of pressure is on Joe Schoen at this draft, obviously, coming up in the spring. And then back to the head coaches thing. So Brian DeBall and Leslie Frazier are the 2 coordinators in Buffalo. DeBall on offense and Frazier on defense. I love DeBall. I think DeBall is the guy. DeBall, the guy. That's my guy. My number 1 candidate for the head coaching job. And that's where they should go. And I think that's where they are going to go. Maybe it's wishful thinking as the Giant fan speaking right now, but I could be wrong. Leslie Frazier, I'm not the biggest fan of. Yes, he's done a great job as the DC of the Bills, but he was a failed NFL head coach with the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, failed might be a strong word, but he was fired from the Vikings after like 3 seasons, and he was the coach before Mike Zimmer. And Frazier made the playoffs 1 year, if I'm not mistaken. And that was the year that Adrian Peterson, coming off the ACL injury, carried Minnesota to the postseason as a wild card. And almost won the NFC North that year, too, which is absolutely wild. And I want to see if Leslie Frazier was the coach the Blair Walsh year, when Blair Walsh missed the field goal in the wild card round. He was the Vikings coach from 2011 to 2013. So he was fired after the 2013 season. So the year after they made the playoffs, and then he goes to the Bucs to be their defensive coordinator. I don't even know who their coach was at the time. I can't even think. And then was the secondary coach of the Ravens, and then assistant head coach and defensive coordinator from 17 on. So I think he's done a good job rebuilding his reputation. But I'm not sure if, for me, he's the guy going forward, because he coached the Vikings and wasn't great. And, so 3-13 in 2011, that's terrible. 10-6 was the Peterson year. 4th in Coach of the Year voting. And then 2013, he was fired after going 5-10-1. So, to be fair, the Vikings, dysfunctional organization in many ways. Rick Spielman just lost his job there in Minnesota at the firing season. And obviously Spielman hired Frazier. And Frazier was actually the intern coach in 2010 after Brad Childress was fired. So that's something that I did not mention earlier. And he was the defensive coordinator from the Vikings from 2007 to 2010. So I think Leslie's done a good job rebuilding his reputation, but I'm not sure if he would be my pick over Brian DeBall, who I think has just absolutely unlocked Josh Allen and that offense. And I think he's going to make a good NFL head coach. Brian Flores, the former Dolphins coach, you're going to hear that name linked to the Giants a lot. Obviously, undeservingly fired from the Dolphins, in my opinion. I think somebody's going to hire him, whether it's the Giants, the Texans, the Bears, the Vikings. Someone's going to hire him. Denver. But I just don't know who is going to hire him. So we'll see. And I think that Flores deserves a second chance. And he was fired because the Dolphins are just dumb and stupid. And they're a dysfunctionally bad organization. And I think people forgot about that because they went 9-8, and I believe they were 10-6 in the 2020 season. And then Flores got them to overachieve the year that everybody thought they were going to be the worst team in the league back in 2019. So I think that Flores absolutely deserves a second chance. Another name you're hearing is Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of people think that he's somebody else like Leslie Frazier that deserves a second chance. I think Bowles has done a good job as the DC of the Buccaneers, but he was a failure head coach of the New York Jets. I know he went 10-6 his first season with the Jets. I believe Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback of the Jets that year. And they were 10-5 and lost in week 17 at the Bills. And then the Jets really haven't been a good team since like that season and from a record standpoint. And Bowles was fired after, I believe, the 2018 season. So Bowles was there for 4 years. That's hard to think about. The Jet coach was there for 4 years. And then Adam Gase was there for 3. And then now it's Robert Saleh. And so Todd Bowles obviously works under Bruce Arians with the Bucs. Done a great job with the talent they have and whatnot. So the case for Todd Bowles is similar to Leslie Frazier. Like, deserves a second chance because they were with a dysfunctional organization for the first time. But the Giants are also a dysfunctional organization. Let's not forget that. I understand that some of the dysfunction may go away with the Schoen hire, and it's like a feel-good kind of a thing. But over the last decade, this has been a dysfunctional organization. And they went out and hired Pat Shurmur a few years ago. And the case for him was he deserves a second chance because he was like 6-10 with the Browns and got fired. And we know the Browns are a dysfunctional, messy franchise and all. So that's how Pat Shurmur got the second chance, and then he got fired, and then he was Denver's offensive coordinator, and then he got fired from Denver. So that's why I'm not the biggest fan of coaches deserving a second chance. But I understand the concept as long as you help your reputation by being an overqualified coordinator, like how Frazier and Bowles and Brian Leftwich have become. And Brian Leftwich has never coached in the NFL before. That's another one to keep an eye on for the potential jobs as well. So it's going to be interesting. So if I had to rank my coaching candidates for the Giants, I'd say 1 is the Ball. I love the Ball. Number 2, I'm surprised this name hasn't been thrown around yet in terms of the Giants head coaching search. Eric Bieniemy. I think he deserves an opportunity to coach. I really do. But the reason why I have him 2 below Brian DeBall is Eric Bieniemy. There has to be more there. Like, why? I'm surprised he's just not in a job. He deserves to have a job. I'll applaud whomever hires Eric Bieniemy. Are people, like, skeptical because is he a potential Patrick Mahomes product, like how Josh McDaniels turned out to be a Tom Brady product? Are they thinking he's the next Josh McDaniels? Like, that's just crazy to me that Eric Bieniemy hasn't gotten an opportunity. But because of the skepticism of some teams maybe thinking that he's a product of the Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, I guess, like, some of these teams are smarter with some guys, and there must be more to it. Like, that really disappoints me that Eric Bieniemy does not have a job in the NFL, because I think he absolutely deserves one. But yeah, those 2 are my top 2. And then my number 3 coaching candidate for Big Blue, I mean, I gotta say Brian Leftwich. I think he's done a marvelous job with Tampa this season as their offensive coordinator. He's getting a lot out of guys that are either older or kind of bounced around, like Leonard Fournette, Rob Gronkowski. And then he's doing a lot with 44-year-old Tom Brady, obviously. But you could argue that he's a Brady product. But Brady really hasn't been all that great this year, let's be honest. Like, Tom Brady's starting to show signs of decline as an elite NFL quarterback. So I would put Leftwich 3 in terms of my coaching candidates. And then like I just said, I don't really love the idea of a failed head coach in their first spot getting another opportunity. I don't hate it, but it's just, I've seen it happen time in and time again with the Giants with Pat Shurmur, and then that didn't work out. So you see these all the time, and then Adam Gase with the Jets is the other example of that. So, but I really feel like these two gentlemen, in Leslie Frazier and Todd Bowles, have improved their reputations on capabilities of becoming a successful head coach. And I mean, both of those guys have had winning records in the NFL before, unlike Pat Shurmur. So there's some glimmer of hope if there were to hire one of those two names. Doug Peterson is a name tossed around for some jobs, but I do not want him as the Giant coach. I just am not a fan. I understand he won the Super Bowl with Philly. That was a great coaching job by him. And the case for him would be Eagles' dysfunctional franchise. Potentially could have gotten rid of him too soon, but he probably did deserve that firing because they tanked that game in Week 17 just so the Giants couldn't make the postseason. They didn't even try in that game, and that ultimately cost Doug Peterson his job in Philly last year. And Nick Sirianni's done a fabulous job as his replacement, I think. So, we shall see. Trying to think of any other potential names for the job to replace Joe Judge other than those couple that I just mentioned. Jim Caldwell's somebody I really like. The case against him for me is that he's a Peyton Manning Colts product. But he still went to the Super Bowl with the Colts. And he was a really good coach even with the Lions. And the Lions fired him after going 9-7, if I'm not mistaken, which was beyond stupid. And so Jim Caldwell is somebody I wouldn't mind either. I would put him as like my number 6 candidate. But I would pick one of the other two former coaches over Jim Caldwell. Because right now, Bowles and Frazier's reputations, because of their great coordinators' jobs, have been phenomenal. But yeah, Jim Caldwell with the Lions, 36-28, stupidly got fired after 2017. But that, let's be honest, that was because dysfunctional Detroit franchise. That's why. That's why Jim Caldwell got fired in 2017. And the worst coaching hire over the past decade, arguably, was Matt Patricia. I mean, I thought he was a joke of a coach. He was obviously a Brady Patriots product. So is Joe Judge. And so is Josh McDaniels. And it's going to be really interesting to see who the Giants hire. And Jim Caldwell's somebody I really wouldn't mind. I know a lot of people would toss out Sean Payton as a potential candidate, but he's not leaving New Orleans. I mean, come on. I understand he doesn't have a quarterback right now, but Sean Payton's one hell of a coach, and he is a saint for life. I think that what he means to that organization can't be overlooked. So I would cross off Sean Payton as much as that would excite Giants fans. And say if they were to hire Brian DeBall as the next head coach. Now the question would be, would he bring along people from the Bills with them? Like, would he bring, Ken Dorsey with him as his offensive coordinator? Bobby Johnson? So it's going to be interesting for sure. And I wonder who will replace, obviously, Shane as the assistant general manager. So now it looks like Derek is ready to come on. So once we come back, I will have Derek, Brandon, Felix on the show. Let's see. Okay, now I am joined by my buddy Derek Brandon Felix of the New York Puck. How are you doing on this fine Friday night?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Madison?
I'm good. I'm just very excited about the New York Football Giants, in my opinion, with a slam dunk general manager hiring of Joe Schoen. What are your thoughts on this hire?
I'm definitely think it's the right move. Look, we've been back and forth. Not just this year but last year about how, and it was pretty obvious that they had to clean house, and this is what they had to do, and they had to go outside, and they're getting a guy that is has been with a very successful organization that turned everything around, and they've done a great job there in Buffalo, and obviously I'll be pulling for them this weekend, and who knows? We might be looking at the New York Bills or the New Jersey Bills because they might be hiring a coach from there as well.
Yeah, and the coach that I want them to hire from Buffalo is Brian DeBall, who is the offensive coordinator. I've been banging the Shane DeBall drum since Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman walked out the door. What do you make of Brian DeBall or potentially Leslie Frazier as potential head coaching candidates?
Well, I gotta give a shout out plug to our buddy Rob Davis, because he talked about Brian DeBall, that he thinks that Brian DeBall is going to be the hire. And Brian DeBall, I think, is the offensive coordinator there. And of course, Frazier has been around. I know that. I'm more of a defensive guy. But I think DeBall would be a really good hire if that's what they decided to do. And usually when you bring in somebody from a different team, yeah, sometimes they're going to want to take some of those assistants and bring in some of their guys. So the only question I would have, it would say they do that, Madison. They bring in the ball, they hire him. Obviously he gets to hire his own, coordinators and stuff. I just had one question. I was thinking about this the other night. I think Patrick Graham, he's done a good job in terms of the defense. It's obviously going to be up to the hire, if it is the ball, whoever it is. I'm just wondering, what the status will be of Patrick Graham.
I don't mind Patrick Grimm. I think he did a fine job the last couple of years. I just think the defense as a whole just underachieved last year, whether it was because of injury or inconsistent play. I wouldn't be shocked if he's retained, but at the same time, I won't be shocked if either A, he gets head coaching interviews with other teams, or B, gets hired as a defensive coordinator for somebody. I think he'll be somewhere in the NFL. I might not be the Giants, but I think that he could land on his feet somewhere else if it's not the Giants.
I agree with you there. I mean, I was thinking the same thing. There's always going to be good opportunities out there. Obviously there are other teams that are making changes, and I think Graham, he did a good job. The Giants, they did have some injuries, some key injuries up front that really did hurt. And they probably are they're gonna need to improve in terms of pass rushing. That one guy that they have, I think he was a rookie, actually had a good year for them. Can't think of the guy's name, but yeah, I mean, there will definitely be some other opportunities out there, and so if they do hire the ball, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they didn't hire him. I wanted to just ask you really quick. Do you have any thoughts on Flores?
I think Flores has a shot to get the job. In my head, just threw out some candidates. Before I had you on, I did a little solo thought on my take on the hire of Shane and the potential candidates. I have Flores as a candidate for the job, but I really think that it should be the ball. But Flores is up there. He's in my top three. I think
If he doesn't wind up with the Giants, maybe he winds up with the Raiders, or he winds up somewhere else. So I mean, or Houston. Those are places that have opportunities available. So, but I think it sounds like we both expect this to be another Bills hire, and the ball would certainly make sense. And I would definitely want to wish our Buffalo contingent, Rob and Brian,
Yep.
the best of luck. I want to see them go all the way, but the most important thing is that they get the job done on Sunday. It's going to be a tough game.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be an absolute tough game. I don't even know who... I said Bills on the podcast earlier today, but now I'm thinking maybe the Chiefs because I underestimated the loss of Tre'Davious White for the Bills on defense. So that's really interesting that you say that. But my top 5 candidates for the coaching job, DeBall, Flores, this is no order, Bieniemy, who I would like to see get an interview. I'm surprised Bieniemy's not an NFL head coach.
He deserves it. He deserves to be interviewed for a job. Let's be honest. I mean,
He
when
does.
you hear, that they interviewed the former Falcons coach, I mean, that didn't really do anything for me. I mean, I'd love to see Bieniemy get an interview, really. I mean, what does he have to do?
Yeah, so Bieniemy, Flores, obviously the ball, and then Frazier and Bowles are my top 5 candidates for the job. Although Jim Caldwell is somebody that I would throw in as the 6th guy too. He got the Lions to overachieve a couple times, and the Lions stupidly fired him after 2017. What do you make of Jim Caldwell?
It's funny that you bring him up because I was thinking about him. He has been discussed over the past week, and I never understood why the Lions got rid of him. And I know that it's Dan Campbell, former tight end. I remember him, obviously, when he played. He was a good player. And I think that even though they didn't win many games, they won 1 or 2 games, but they were competitive, and I think he did an okay job. But I think Caldwell definitely deserves another look. I mean, it would be nice to see him get another opportunity. Absolutely.
Yes, I would say him and Bowles and Frazier, the 3 guys that were head coaches in the past that I'd like to see get another opportunity, whether it's with the Giants or elsewhere. What did you make of the other candidates that the Giants interviewed? I know we were pro Schoen, but did you like some of the other guys they interviewed?
I think that they did a pretty good job. They would obviously, anytime you have to make a decision like this, when you're trying to rebuild an organization, they have to try to explore, every option, and especially you want to look at the best options, and so they made sure that they interviewed a few candidates. They took their time, and once the word came down. I think the word came down probably maybe 24 hours ago, or it sounded like that's the way they were going to go, and I just hope for us, for Giant fans, that whatever they do, that it works out. It works out because they've been a train wreck for a while, and I feel like they're the most irrelevant franchise right now, and I can't believe I'm saying that when they won the Super Bowl, the 2011 season. It's crazy to think that.
They're right up there. I don't know if it's fair to say the most irrelevant. I would say maybe in the NFC, but don't forget the Texans are pretty darn irrelevant too. I think they're the most irrelevant, honestly, because Deshaun Watson's in trouble, hasn't played in so long. They had another one and done coach. I think it's the Texans and then probably the Giants and the Jaguars right there. In terms of,
if you want to put the Lions in there,
yeah,
you're welcome to.
Forgot about them.
I think the Jets would have been in that category because they have made the playoffs in a long time, but I think they're trending in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And so that's good for them. I mean, good for them that they seem to have made a decent hire, and they seem to be trending the right way. I think when I say what I meant by irrelevant, it's more of like you just couldn't watch the Giants. The offense was so bad, so anemic. Obviously, without Daniel Jones, and looks like you were proven right about Daniel Jones. Unfortunately, he just can't stay healthy, and I don't know what decision's going to be there. That's obviously going to be a real tough decision, for the organization. Maybe what they should do is, you want to bring him back, you could bring him back, but you have to bring in a proven quarterback so that you have another option there in case he goes down. Yeah, and it's good to have that proven quarterback. You can't have just an awful backup. I mean, Colt McCoy at least was okay in that role, but they that was just an awful job by Gettleman, and they really have to. They're going to have to make some really. They're going to have to make a lot smarter decisions. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Colt McCoy in the 2020 season went in Seattle and beat the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. Don't forget about that. And
I haven't. Look. He didn't make a lot of throws in that game. It was mostly running, but I mean, at least when you brought him in, he knew how to play.
Yeah, and he won games for the Cardinals this year.
So, I mean, was he not the backup in Arizona? Is that where he wound up?
Yeah, and he won a couple games for the Cardinals while Kyler Murray was out.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Colt McCoy in college. I think he was with Texas, and he was a real good quarterback in college. And look, some guys, some players, they're just great players in college, and they don't project, to be more than a backup, and that happens. But at least the guy's capable. At least the guy was capable of being a backup, and that was just an awful job by the Giants. And look, and one of the issues they're going to have is with the cap. So I'm very curious to see what they're going to do with that.
Yes, the cap is a big deal. Like, Saquon Barkley, to me, is a guy that could potentially get traded. Like, I wouldn't rule that out. The biggest name traded this offseason entirely might be Saquon Barkley, if not the other running back that Dave Gettleman drafted high in Carolina, Christian McCaffrey. I think those are the two biggest names that are potentially traded this offseason. And
I'm actually just gonna say one thing on Barkley, because I saw some of his comments about how he felt after the year. And obviously, he's just been injured. And obviously, when you have those kind of injuries, it's tough. And it was pretty obvious that he wasn't up to speed. He just talked about how he's just going to get back and get himself ready. And my question to you, I feel like he just doesn't have a lot of value right now. Maybe you could get a 4th-round pick from him. But I almost feel like they'd be better off bringing him back for his final year, because it will be his final year. If he gets into the shape, then and he plays better, and if the team is not where they're supposed to be, maybe he would have more value. Maybe he could have more value. I know that's probably maybe that's too optimistic, because when you look at the NFL trade deadline, there's not too many big trades, but I almost feel. Unless they want to go in a different direction, because you could find running backs. It turned out to be a big mistake for them. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens, and I think they could do better than a 4th of Saquon trade. If Sam Darnold can bring back a 2nd, then Saquon could bring back a 2nd or a 3rd. I'm sorry. That's the thing that comes to my mind, because obviously Carolina overpaid for Darnold at the time. Well, I thought that it was worth the price for Darnold, and the Jets did a great job in that deal. So you never know with these kinds of things. And ironically enough, my buddy Jeff was on the show it was like the Giants fired Joe Judge. You're talking about potential trade destinations if Saquon were to get traded, and he threw out the Bills as a potential destination. And
it's all going to depend, and I think he's on something there, because I actually was going to bring it up just before you mentioned about Jeff, and mentioning that's funny, because I think it's all going to depend on what happens with the Buffalo Bills the rest of this postseason. That's what it's going to depend on.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the Bills the rest of this postseason too. And another guy I'm interested from a Giants perspective is Leonard Williams, who they just paid big money to in the offseason. I'm wondering if that's a potential cap casualty down the road, or a potential trade asset.
I think you make an interesting point. They paid him. He was really good, obviously, when he came over. It's a possibility, but if you do subtract him, you are subtracting probably your top pass rusher. I know, this was a tough season. It was a tough season. It was a tough season, period.
Yeah.
I mean, it was even tough listening to Giant games because I listen to most. I like listening to the radio.
I love listening to Bob and Carl.
And I love Banks, and just hearing them like so frustrated and angry and just so they were. I mean, yeah. I mean, they're pulling no punches. They sounded like they were depressed. And it was tough. It's got to be tough because they're professionals, and they have a job to do, and that was even tough for me to listen to some of those games.
Yeah, I love Bob and Carl. I think they're the best radio broadcasters in out of our teams in New York. Period. I think they're the most realistic. I mean, we talked about like before we started going with the Rangers broadcasters, Kenny and Dave, and
they're good.
They're good. But I just think that Carl and Bob just do a great job, and they're always honest. And I applaud Bob and Carl for that. And I think Bob and Carl are ecstatic about this hire. I really want to go listen to Bob's podcast. I think Bob has a podcast where he's on Sirius XM.
Great. I think, you know why I think they're so good together? Because they're in sync. You know, it's like when you hear two good broadcasters, they're able to play off one another so well. It's kind of like why Pat Summerall and John Madden, who recently passed away, they were the best. I mean, there will never be a better broadcast duo than those guys, and they were both obviously, you know, one was a former college and Summerall was a former Giant kicker, and they would just play so well with each other. It's kind of like what Sam Rosen was with John Davidson.
Yep.
There's so many examples of it, and you need that kind of honesty, and you need that kind of chemistry from your broadcasters. You need them to pull no punches.
Yeah. So before we go, let's talk a little bit of Australian Open. What are your thoughts on this tournament just in general? And it's just a big disappointment for me with the Novak, yeah.
Oh God, I mean, I'll be real honest here. I'm following it. I'm not watching. I'm not watching. I just feel, and I don't think it has anything to do with Tennis Australia, and I was pretty critical of them, but I feel this is more a critique of Australia, you know, because, I mean, look, I get it. They have rules in place, and, you know, 98 or whatever percentage are going to be vaccinated, but Novak Djokovic is a 9-time Australian Open champion. He's tied with Federer and Nadal. I mean, at the top or whatever. I mean, the Grand Slams and you know, it doesn't just go for Novak Djokovic either, Madison. Because I was reading about a female player and how they treated her. I think she was maybe from Czech Republic or Slovakia, and I was just thinking to myself, this is how you're treating athletes, and this has to do with Australia. But from what I've seen, and just from following, it has been a good tournament, and kudos to Amanda Anisimova, who
she's been tremendous.
She had 2 unbelievable wins back to back. She beat Naomi Osaka last night, and Osaka beat her in 3 sets, and it went to I guess the super tiebreak. She won 10-5, and she saved 2 match points, and so I was tracking it, and she's a great story because she's only 20, right? She's from New Jersey, and she's 20 years old, and she lost her dad. Her dad passed away suddenly when she was 19 or 18 in 2019, and for her to, and now she's getting. And Tara Cahill is a really good coach. That's basically giving her a voice, but for her to be this successful, and she's got a lot of talent and a big serve, to have that kind of success, and now she has to go up against the number 1 player in the world. That's a great story right there. That's the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, you mentioned it, Amanda Anisimova. I think she's just been amazing, and I really hope that she goes far in this tournament for her sake. But that girl is someone that's certainly on the rise. And someone that I thought was going to be great in this tournament, but she was an early bounce out, was Coco Gauff, who I absolutely love.
Oh, she's young. She's young. I mean, is she 18 yet? Is she 17, 18? I mean, it takes time sometimes. I mean, and sometimes you're going to have some setbacks. I saw that she lost early in the first round. It happens. It happens. I mean, because she's not playing every tournament. Then you have the whole restrictions, and it's hard. It's very hard. I mean, And I mean, I know that there are some good matchups coming up. I mean, Azarenka's got a really tough match coming up. I'm glad to see. Did you see? There was a video of her with her son, and they asked her how she played. She played a great match where she only dropped maybe 2 games against Svitolina, and her son answered awesome.
Oh, that's
Her 5-year-old
adorable.
son answered awesome, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, that is great. So, Derek, we don't have time to get into the Rangers of the Knicks, but
It's okay.
we got to do that next time you come on. We'll talk about the Garden teams and maybe trade deadline time. We'll have you on for NBA, NHL, like the trade deadlines. We'll talk about those teams then. So it was a pleasure to have you on tonight, as always, Derek.
I just appreciate, getting the chance, obviously, and it's always fun talking with you because you keep it real, Madison, and you're a great person, and I'm glad that you're having success, and I wish you all the best.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and I hope you have a great night.
You too. Have a good week and enjoy the games.
And that was Derek Brandon Felix on the Giants general manager hiring, plus a little bit of Australian Open there at the end. Hopefully we'll get him on soon to talk some Knicks and Rangers when they start to get into the crunch time of their respective regular seasons. So I may have 2 more guests on potentially later tonight. If not, maybe next weekend. We'll see. But if I don't record again for the rest of the weekend, I hope you guys have a great weekend, everyone.